Hello, Alan Ryder, Southeastern Railway Museum, and welcome to what may be one of our last episodes of the work on our switch engine 8202. If you've been following our channel, we've been doing quite a bit of work. What seemed like just a one-shot deal of assembling the trucks, getting it back under the trucks, turned out to be a lot more stuff that needed to be done. And over the last couple of years, we've gradually knocked all the little bits and pieces out, and we're down to finishing up a couple of little minor things, and then this baby will be ready to go to work. So without much more to do, we'll go ahead and finish up the little details and put her to work. Well, this year we had a relatively mild winter with one notable exception. Right in early December, it got down to something on the order of 7 degrees, which in Atlanta is extremely cold. We normally drain our locomotives. They do not have antifreeze. Big diesels do not. Well, despite our precaution, this particular water line froze and split in this one spot, so that was one of our little tasks to replace it, and I'll show you where the new one is. It won't take any prizes as far as being easy to see, but if you look down there, you can see that copper line. It comes out of the head on the opposite side, which is even harder to see. This is the air compressor head. It comes out of the head, comes out of the air compressor head on the opposite side, comes across, ties in with the head on this side, and then there's a drain pipe that you can't really see the T, but there was a little bit of a low spot, and so cold weather got it and split it, and so another one of those tasks for the care and feeding of locomotives. We replaced it, and no big deal. This is what's called a deadweight tester, and it's used for calibrating gauges, like this pressure gauge right here. And basically what it is there's a oil reservoir here with a small valve, and you put the gauge on this end and close the reservoir here so that the oil is sealed up in this section here, and then as you screw this in, that increases the pressure, and it raises this platform, and there's different weights you put on the platform for whatever pressure you want. So we'll put this gauge on the tester and let you see how it works. So this little platform here is the equivalent of 5 pounds, and then this is the equivalent of a 50-pound weight. This is 50-pound mass. So put that on, put a second 50-pound on, and as we screw this in, it compresses the oil, and you can see the gauge starting to go up. When it gets to about 100 pounds, this will raise up. There it's up. So you spin it, that gets rid of the friction, so you can see gauge is reading around 100 and it's supposed to read 105, and that's pretty close. I've already calibrated it once, but you can see there's a little bit of internal friction in the gauge, so as it comes up from one direction, it may not quite make it. It go the other way, it may not quite make it. But it's more or less around 105. So if we want to do, we got 105 right now. This is another 20. That would be 125. And that's pretty much where it's reading. It's not quite there, but it's as good as it's going to get with that kind of gauge. This isn't a real high accuracy gauge. So that's how a deadweight tester works. And For railroad operations with all the different air gauges, this is the old school way of calibrating gauges. There's a little bit newer system, but it requires a little bit more hardware than what we have, so this is what we use. The gauge tester, besides calibrating gauges, can also be used for calibrating pressure switches. And this is the compressor control pressure switch from 8202, and wanted to check its calibration. Turns out most of the problems weren't really in the calibration as much as a lot of dirt and stuff had gotten into it, and after I lubricated it, it seems to be working okay. So right now it's set for the closing, or actually the opening, at 140. So got enough weights to make up 140 psi, and you can hear it click. This deadweight tester actually has a set of instructions for people who actually read them, so you can actually follow all the details on that and see how the thing works. These are the air gauges for 8202. I've taken that cover off so that they're relatively easy to get to. My original plan was to take the gauges off the panel, which is what you typically do, and calibrate each one on the deadweight tester. But if you look, when I tried, turns out they're pretty difficult to remove. Those screws don't necessarily want to come out, and then the copper tubing's pretty tight. And how they managed to do this in the old days, where you had to calibrate them every month, is beyond me. I suspect they calibrated them with a pencil, in other words, sign the form. So rather than trying to take the gauges off, what I did, as you saw in the previous segment, is I calibrated this gauge. And then I used that gauge to calibrate these. First I connected it to main reservoir, got that right, and then connected it to brake pipe and did the brake pipe gauges. And calibration is actually fairly simple. You take the covers, the glass off of these, pull the needles off. I'll show a picture of the tool to do that, and set the pressure at what the gauge typically runs at, put the needle back on. And normally that's all you need to do. Occasionally you may find one that's accurate at 130 pounds, but then not accurate at 50. And with these kind of gauges, that probably means you're going to have to replace the gauge. So that's the gauge calibration. Okay, these are the tools to take the pointers off and put them back on. That's an older one. You actually, for different gauges, you can use different ones, but you can see it's got a hook that goes underneath the pointer and a little pin to push it out. You could actually use a screwdriver, but you might damage the gauge. But this is a different one. This is one a little easier to use. Again, depends on the gauge. You slip it underneath the pointer, which this one doesn't want to go, but it goes underneath the pointer. It goes underneath the pointer, something like this, and then you just screw the pin down, kind of like that, and it will pop the needle off. I don't know that I have it in the right place. I don't really know that I want to take the needle off on this one, but that's how it works. So one or the other, depending on which one works better. And when you're ready to put the needle back on, you line it up carefully and then use this to push it back on. In case you're wondering how an air gauge works, and this applies to any air gauge, not just locomotives, we'll take this apart. This is an easy one to see, but air pressure comes in the bottom of the gauge, goes through this tube here. This is called a Borden tube, and as the pressure increases, the tube actually expands. Because it's in a curve, it expands outward like that, and as it does, the gauge moves. So It's a pretty simple concept, and as I was mentioning a little while ago, typically when you calibrate them, all you have to do if they're off is to move the pointer to the proper point. This junction box in the ceiling in front of the engine is needs to have a cover on it, but I don't really want to put the cover back on just like it is, because those wires are all brittle. Trying to stuff them back in the box is an invitation for trouble. So I've come up with a slightly different solution. So this is a 4-inch square enclosure that I bought from W.W. Granger. It's fairly common, 4x4x4. And what I did was I cut the bottom out of it, and then we drilled these holes which match the original lid for the junction box up there. And you can tell there was probably an issue the way that top of it, which is the inside, was burnt at some point. So then I made these studs. So what I'll do is I'll put this thing in. It's going to be facing the other way, and put these studs through there and have a nice cover. Alright, so we're going to give this a try. Not sure how much you'll see, but put that up like that. And we'll take one of these studs, run it through, try to find the hole like that. Cue to find the hole. I double nutted these studs so I can screw them in. Alright, got that one. Now we'll try the lid here. So it's in. All 4 studs are in, and of course, hindsight's a wonderful thing. If I'd thought about it, I would have put the studs in first, take the nuts off, and then shove the box in on top of the studs, but I didn't. But we got it done anyway. So that's all the wiring should be protected now. We'll move on to other wonderful things. If you saw the last video update on this engine, you'll remember there was a segment about replacing the socket on the amber warning light on the roof, and we've got a couple of other light fixtures that need sockets replaced. These are in the engine room. This is one of them, so I'll run a tap through the holes there and put in a new socket and bulb. That one shouldn't be too difficult, but this one here in the engine room may not be much fun because it's pretty difficult to get up in there to do this one. So exactly how I'm going to do that, I'm not so sure, but as you can see, it's way up there and there's a bunch of stuff in the way. So we shall see. Well, we're going to do the easy fixture first, which is this one here. And fortunately the wiring has already, or the wires have already been pulled, and they're pretty decent. So step one is to cut them and strip them to length. Now before I strip the other one, I put the wire label on so that I know which one's positive and which one's negative. Doesn't really make a whole lot of difference. The light bulb doesn't care, but if we ever have a problem with low voltage grounds or something, it might be a little bit more interesting to try to troubleshoot if they're wired backwards. And here's the socket. Shove it up in here and get the mounting screws started. That's about where it's supposed to go. Now go find some mounting screws. Mounting screws for the wires are common thread, are regular slotted head screws, and these are Phillips. So of course you know it. They don't want to make it easy for you. But I shouldn't complain. I didn't drop and lose the screws. They look like they both started. So there we go. One little trick I do on these, since they're kind of in an exposed area, is I'll put a little bit of dielectric grease on the threads to the bulb, so that next time some poor schmo has to take the bulb out, it won't break off. It'll be maybe come out fairly easily. So there we have it. The bulb's installed. And we have light. So this is a good thing. We'll put the cover on and then we'll attack the other one. Got the glass globe. Now let's hope this will fit. So this one's all installed. Now we're going to tackle the hard one. There is a person in there working on that light socket, so we're crossing our fingers so we can get the screws out.
Yeah.
So Mike has just about got the socket assembled. It's already hooked up, and he's just putting the last screw in. And I have to say, he deserves a medal for this one, because it is not a very fun place to be. So it's getting there. So Mighty Mike got the socket installed.
Yeah, let me do it a little bit better.
Now Ryan's put the bulb in the globe in. He's putting the guard on right now.
I'm just gonna deal with it.
Even that's not easy to get to.
Here we are.
But he got it. Guten tight. On switches like this, the fan and radiator compartment are separated from the rest of the locomotive internals by a partition. That's of course so that the cooling air will go in the front through the fan and then up through the radiators. So to get in here to do work, this panel is hinged, and opens up, and voila, you're into the fan room. There's the fan. There are the radiators up there, if you can see them. For more access, this panel is hinged, just like that. When I started to work on this locomotive, though, this panel was missing, and I found it in with some painting supplies. Why it was there, I don't know, but had to replace the piano hinge. I got that taken care of, and then some of the other guys in the team have installed it, and so all is good on replacing that. The one on the other side needs a little bit more tune-up. It doesn't quite go all the way down, but we'll get that taken care of. So one of the finishing touches we're doing is we're getting a coat of paint on the cab, and Larry's busy here. He's already got half the interior painted, or at least got a coat of primer on it. So now he's working on the other half. Turn around and say hi, Larry.
Hi, Larry.
So anywho, it'll look a lot better when we get done. Well, that's about it for our task list. If you've been following our series of videos, you've probably noticed that for the most part for each series, the tasks have become more and more minor, and this one's pretty much wrapping things up. Like a lot of projects, it's never completely done, but it's done enough for now. So we're going to put this puppy to work. Maybe later on we'll do a couple other videos. We've got things like the load regulator to replace, but she'll run now, and this is kind of a special weekend. 8202 was built in May of 1950, so in a sense this is her birthday month, and this is Memorial Day weekend. So in light of that, we're going to use her on our historic train ride, which is kind of special. It'll be call it a coming out party. So enjoy.